Okay, this meeting, I guess we can call the meeting to order, and we can take a roll call of the working group members. So Lexington, wave your hand or unmute. Thank you. Lincoln,
I'm here.
Concord, and that's it. We have three out of. Richard, you're muted. You're muted. Oh, there's Paul. And we have Paul.
Yes, hi.
Hi. Good to see you.
I never know where these Zoom links are between your messages and Richard. They're sometimes buried in the agenda.
Yeah, we're going to straighten that out for the future, but the working group may have one or two more meetings. I'm not sure. So we're calling the meeting to order at 10:00, whatever it is, 5 or 6. And Lincoln, Lexington, Arlington, Concord, all on board, as well as Mass DOT from District 4, and Ross from Lexington, Jane from Lincoln, and George from Arlington too. And did I miss anybody? We have 9 people. So I think that's it. Okay. We can dive right into our agenda, but I think we did a lot of discussion of the corridor. Well, we didn't do corridor management plan last time. So Richard, I think you're the expert on how that all evolved, and we could spend a few minutes because the draft recommendations that I made up were awaiting a grounding back in the memorandum of understanding in the corridor management plan. And the corridor management plan came first. So
yeah, so
5 or 4 minutes.
the reason that I wanted this on the agenda is our committee only has one charge, and that one charge is to implement the corridor management plan. It's interesting because looking at the park's comments, and again, they're one of 5 of us. I had re-looked again at the corridor plan and looked at what we've done, and I have some suggested recommendations that hopefully folks can agree on. But
does it have to do directly with the corridor management plan? Because let's stick with that for a minute.
Yeah, so the corridor management plan, and let me share that for a second.
You have it up. You're going to put it up.
I'm going to put it up.
Yeah, great.
So let me find my Zoom link again, and let me share my screen. So what I had done is I tried to excerpt from the corridor management plan things that discussed things that might be relevant to the Route 2A resurfacing project. Again, one of the things is that the corridor management plan has top 11 recommendations. We've completed about the first 5. Number 9 says follow context-sensitive roadway design guidelines to preserve the intrinsic qualities of the byway, provide access to pedestrians, bicyclists and pedestrians, and improve safety and mobility along the roadway. So the plan talks about 4 intersections or elements within the project area that are poorly designed, need improvement. It talks about stewardship of what some of our responsibilities are. It talks obviously about things outside of the project area, but it talks about implementing the Minuteman National Historical Parks Master Plan, conceptual plan at Route 2A bypass road, includes pros roundabout.
I want to interrupt you there. That's incorrect, because we don't have a master plan
Right.
We only had some conceptual options for a general management plan update that was in progress. That
Right.
never
But
went.
I'm quoting from the.
I know, but I just
No,
want to
yeah,
make sure
right.
people know that that's not correct.
Right, and it talked about some additional things, more stuff about signage and about that we have that responsibility to look at signage. That we want to try and ensure that things are ADA compliant where possible. And to look at the highway design manual in the town of Concord's context sensitive road design policy as we evaluate stuff.
Richard, can I just interject there? Because I looked on the Concord website for that document.
Yeah.
I couldn't find it.
I couldn't
Yeah.
either.
So what do we do about that? You know? Okay,
I'll
go ahead.
find it.
Obviously, one of the people who were involved in this was one of the former engineers in Concord, and he has since moved on. So I think maybe we might need to contact DPW and in the engineering department to find out, does it still exist?
I will do that. That was Bill Edgerton, I'm pretty sure, who was responsible for that.
It wasn't him, it was someone else, but in any event.
Okay, but anyway, there
And
is
again, consider striping bike lanes or shared lane markings, et cetera, et cetera. There's more stuff. But I think part of the key is, interestingly enough, consider options for accommodating bicycles on Route 2A without adding pavement or increasing road width. The travel lanes could be narrowed as narrow as 10.5 feet to create wider shoulders for bicycle travel. And talked about reconfiguring the Hanscom Drive intersection to eliminate slip lanes, narrow the intersection, provide well-defined and slower speed turns. Eliminating the slip lanes will significantly improve the safety of drivers by lowering speeds, limiting high-speed mergers. It says improve existing and install new crosswalks on the byway following consistent context-sensitive design standards, and so forth. So there are a bunch of things. It also talks about.
What's the point, Richard? Where are you trying to go with this?
I'm trying to say here's what our guidelines are, and we have to evaluate the plans in terms of the guidelines. And again, considering lower speeds, looking at pedestrian cycling, and so forth. So I wanted to put a context. Again, consider removing the state highway designation from a portion of the roadway west of I-95 in order to remove, 2A, consider renaming a portion, et cetera. So there's a bunch of things that we need to take into context as we decide what our recommendations are. That's all I wanted to talk about.
But Richard, there's no way to balance conflicting interests within this document. It's really up to us to put values on
Exactly
on the competing interests.
Exactly.
I don't mean competing towns. I mean just the competing elements in the plan. So I don't find that this document gets me any closer to concluding, what I think or what Lincoln should think should happen over there. But go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but it's just,
no.
I've read this document over and over, and it's like reading the U.S. Constitution.
Hey, don't attack that.
Right. So I think when the time comes when I say what I think our recommendation should be, I think you'll see why I wanted to put this out.
I think what we have developed as draft recommendations, it would be easy to point out how the draft recommendations conform with the corridor management plan objectives and the recommendations of the corridor management plan. So this project doesn't meet all of them. It never would. And some things are going to be more feasible and desirable than others. So I've said this before, it is a constant balance between some goals that are competing. The Park Service is a great example. Preserve the resource and provide for public use and enjoyment. Balance that every day. But we always think about it. So I think the corridor management plan might be a similar document that we keep in mind what that document said and what it was trying to do at the time. Interestingly, there's more emphasis on tourism, development, land use, and transportation than on historic preservation. So that's interesting in this section that we're talking about right now, that there's some, but it's not that big emphasis. So
Although the designation as an all-America road comes on two characteristics, historical and cultural.
yeah, there you go. There you go. Thank you. So that's where we are with that. And I think that we can draw a connection with the draft recommendations. I don't know that we need to summarize previous meetings. Richard, you had recommended that. I just
Well, all I wanted to say is that the previous working meeting, we were evaluating the 25-75% and really didn't consider the 100%. I think the 100% really adds quite a bit of context that we didn't have available. And I think one of the things is that we were sort of going by some of the pre-existing assumptions, and the pre-existing assumptions were A, nothing is going to be done with the speed until we have a new speed thing. Secondly, we're going to put up some traffic calming measures, which may or may not be helpful. And we never really fully evaluated what all of those possibilities were. And so we were reacting to a plan with some pre-existing things when we thought MassDOT was going to accommodate cyclists and pedestrians. And with the 100% plans, we now know that MassDOT is given up the idea of accommodating bicycles in any formal way. And when we look at, I think we have the parks input, look at, what does it do for pedestrians? I think, that raises a whole bunch of other questions. And so I'm not sure how valid the recommendations were from our previous meetings.
well, have you abstracted the differences from the 100% plans? I have looked through them briefly, but to be honest, I haven't really dug down deeply into them.
Right. So the essential thing is that they've eliminated any possibility of bicycle accommodations.
Doesn't
MassDOT consider the narrowing of the travel lane to 10.5 feet to be one of the accommodations for bicycles?
But they haven't done that.
Well,
they're
close.
No, we don't know. We know that they have agreed to do that. We know that by doing that, it will provide a little bit better buffer for cyclists. But MassDOT has taken away any visual clues. So there were going to be 23 bicycle signs on the roadway. They were reduced to 11 in the 25-75%, and they were completely eliminated at the 100% design. So that kind of says to me, since we're doing a footprint resurfacing, we're not required to accommodate cyclists and pedestrians.
I'll also throw in, it doesn't matter what your lane widths are, but if you don't have a 4-foot shoulder, then that wouldn't accommodate bikes, unless they're trying to say sharrows, which they obviously aren't. But
right, and you can't do that with a 40 mile an hour speed limit.
So even by Mass DOT's own standards, they're not accommodating.
Right. It essentially works out that way because we're not widening. So since it's only repaving, there just isn't room to meet the standards for bicycle accommodation. So it's a catch-22 almost, but what it ends up meaning is that we can't, with this project, accommodate bicycles because that would involve widening. And we can't like put up the signs or stripe things or paint things because it wouldn't meet any of our standards. You know, like even painting, you know, sharrows isn't something that we want to get into. We hope we're improving it somewhat by having a bit of a shoulder. Folks that want to get out there on that road and ride their bikes, they'll at least have a shoulder striped that's narrow, but it doesn't meet standards, and hopefully it'll slow some cars down.
Could you talk about the lane width then? Because Paul Stedman thinks the lane width is 10.5 feet and the 100% seems to say otherwise.
Would it, yeah, I'm not sure, like, I'm not really involved in all the decisions on the plan, you know, what's ending up on the plan and
Okay.
I mean, but if Paul is decreeing that it should be 10.5, I'm sure they'll change it to that. But it is the 100% plan. Things can still change on it, but I mean, it sounds like that's something that's still a little bit up in the air as far as people aren't on the same page. But it wouldn't, either way, it wouldn't give you the 5-foot shoulder. So that
4 foot or 5 foot?
I believe to count as on-road bicycle accommodation, I think it has to be 5 foot
Whoa.
by per Mass DOT.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what I say. I mean,
It's 4 feet. Yeah, okay.
yeah. So
Paul sorry.
I mean,
to interrupt you. I thought you
there's
were-
probably, you know, these standards are always fluid. And on any project, when I was involved with the design and all that, we always were putting in the 5 foot for a bike accommodation. Now, maybe there's an allowed narrowing to 4 feet and it still counts or whatever, but it's, the point is, you know, we're not going to have that without widening. So it's, you know, our hands are tied on actually providing bicycle accommodations
Okay.
with this
And
project.
Paul, did you want to say something?
Well, in our recommendations, there was one point that I think our working group decided was worth pursuing, and that was to reduce the speed limit to 30 miles an hour, which doesn't give you the bike paths and everything, but it would help bicyclists, it would help pedestrians. And the thinking was that there are precedents for how that speed limits can be reduced, you know, given special circumstances. And, you know, my thought is we make our recommendations and see where it goes. We can't keep talking about this endlessly.
Yeah.
And we have to come to grips with the fact that there is a phase 1, phase 2 process here. Some of us seem to be in denial that there's phase 2, which is meant to capture a lot of these things. So, Tim, what is your thought about a recommendation coming from us that would say, why don't you just drop the speed limit and we'll forego the traffic study and all of that later. Just do it now, because it would be a nice, I'll call it accommodation to the people who are on the representing the towns on Battle Road.
It's my understanding that we can't just decree a lower speed limit. An engineering study is needed, and an engineering, like the speed limit has to be based on the 85th percentile speed. So
Is that law?
what?
Is that in law, or is it a regulation? Or is
Yeah,
it
no,
policy?
that's a legislative, that's a law or a regulation.
Well, there's a big difference.
Ross
Sure,
is
but
saying no.
Mass
I wanna
DOT
hear
has to
Ross
comply
say
with it. You know, even if it's a regulation, I'm not sure where it falls, but I know it's stipulated that that's what we have to That's how we have to do it. Now, the one change to that has been, towns can set without a study, they can just decree a 25 mile an hour throughout their whole town or whatever. That is a recent legislation that passed. However, that is not something Mass DOT can do. Only towns can do that for their local streets. But what we can do is design the road for a lower speed. That then lowers the speeds of the vehicles. And then we can do the engineering study to change the speed limit to accommodate, after cars have been driving at a lower speed for a while.
Yeah, but in the meantime, Ross?
Yeah, Tim, this is one thing I'm going to disagree with you on. The 85th percentile, that's old operating procedure. That's not written into law. That's just how they used to set speed limits. You got a road, what are the cars traveling? Let's make that the speed limit. There's been a very strong push. Even I think John Gulliver did a presentation on doing context sensitive speed limit studies now to drop speed limits to what's more appropriate. I know in some areas, you get built up areas that, used to be just going past farms, 40 miles an hour is fine. And now it's houses every 100 feet. So there's been a big push to reevaluate some of these based on what the context is. I think this would be a good opportunity for one. And, I don't disagree that a speed study gets done, but again, there's been a pretty big voice that says speed limits can't just be based on 85th percentile speed anymore.
I know that's been debated, but I hadn't heard that any like as far as Mass DOT's, our charge has changed as far as that goes. I mean,
I think there's even a website for it.
Certainly, if you folks make that recommendation, then great. And if it can be changed such that we replace signs as part of this plan,
that
would be wonderful. I'm not sure. I mean, one thing that we know from the data is you change the speed limit signs and that doesn't change the speed the cars are going. The cars aren't obeying the speed limit that's out there now. They drive the speed they feel comfortable driving. And what you put on the signs doesn't change the overall speed cars are going. So
enforcement does.
Sure. And
Enforcement's
that's
a
a
tough
whole other
thing
thing. You put the signs and start
it definitely has to be in conjunction with other measures, whether it's temporary signs or something like that. I mean, even message boards that say, slow down, new speed limit. There's things you can do in conjunction with it. Certainly, I completely agree with you on that. You put up a new sign, nobody's going to pay attention to it. They drive what they feel comfortable. So it's the other measures that would need to be included in that process.
Tim, did I understand that you just said that Lincoln, for example, could just decree a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit and they don't have to get the state to agree to it? Or does it have to be a town-wide 30-mile-an-hour speed limit unless otherwise posted? Or
for their
how does that work?
Roads. Yes, for their local, so it wouldn't count on this road. But
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's as I understand it, was the legislation like just a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And I don't know if you've noticed it, a few towns, you enter the town and there's
Oops.
Tim just froze.
Uh-oh.
I'll finish your
Tim's
sentence,
unfreezing.
Tim. Yeah, well, for
sign that
example,
says this, whatever they've agreed for the, speed limit's
Okay.
different on the state roads, but
There is a sign in the project area that does have the 25-mile-an-hour warning about as you're entering Lexington.
right, and
And
then
that's within the
shortly
project.
thereafter, there's a 35-mile-an-hour sign.
Right.
So I kind of cancels it out.
One of the things, if I know Jane likes to read a lot, I sent out maybe 10 minutes before the meeting a link to MAPC, sent out a thing that has links to Mass DOT's speed regulations and Since MassDOT is so interested in reducing speeds because it reduces fatalities, crashes, etc., that it talks about the different mechanisms that towns or MassDOT has to reduce speeds.
I haven't had a chance to read that.
My thought is that the working group can make a recommendation to the Battle Road Scenic Byway Committee that we recommend that it would be good to have the speed limit changed to 30 miles per hour. That goes to MassDOT, and then the debate begins. And maybe we'll win that argument, maybe we won't. But the sooner we weigh in with that opinion, the sooner we'll know what the future is going to look like. And it doesn't have to be, a perfectly technically backed up recommendation yet at this stage, but we could still make it. I think it's the most important recommendation we can make, and it would help pedestrians and cyclists, and in a sense would create a calmer transit through the national park.
I agree. I think we agree on the speed limit more than anything else. Although I think now with the parks letter, at least a majority of members of the Byway Committee agree on several others that maybe there wasn't all that much agreement about before.
I think our charge is not only to make recommendations, but just to do the research, read, look at the documents
Sure.
carefully and report it back to the full committee. So I don't think we're failing if we, pardon me?
You did that.
Right, but a lot of that got removed in your latest draft that you
No,
circulated.
I kept the recommendations, which is what we said we were going to do. We said
But the background, right,
Yeah.
the basis for the recommendations was knocked out. Richard wrote, for example, a pretty darn good rationale for lowering the speed limits. And I
Yeah.
think that ought to be included in whatever we send out. Yeah.
I think an easy way to do that, I was shooting for something that was shorter and more comprehensible immediately. And then one thing could be that the recommendations would be an attachment or another section, so you don't lose the thinking. But
You don't mean the
like-
recommendation, you mean the background, not the recommendations.
I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. And to Paul's point, we don't have always the technical expertise to know chapter and verse of, for every kind of recommendation that we're making and how it lines up with mass highways. Jane?
I've been listening to this.
Too long.
It's hearsay about this 85 thing. And if none of us know, whether it's the state or local, and whether it's legislation or regulation or what, that has got to be made clear. At the RTC, we're talking about it all the time. All the neighboring towns around Lincoln have the third, you enter, you'll go, and then a few feet later, it may say 30 or 35 or 100, who knows? But we don't, Lincoln doesn't have that. And this road needs, it's being predicated. We're going to put in this stuff and then we'll do the study. Well, if it requires legislation, where are our legislators? Let's contact the legislators. And if it requires some DOT regulation, we should at least know where this is coming from. And as the fellow in Lexington, that is that when I go to the BPAC, the Bikeway people, they had a letter from the head of the National Transportation, whatever authority. And he says, we are going to make roads safe. And he says, for all people, and 30 miles an hour with reasonable signage, stop signs. I'm going back to my old friend here. That slows people down and it won't make the road super safe, but at least it gives the pedestrians and the bicyclists a chance. So thank you for letting me say my thing again.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else to say, or have we said it all over and over? I think there's a lot of fatigue in discussing this.
Two things. One is in the corridor plan, it has two specific recommendations. One, to eliminate all the slip lanes. And we didn't quite make any recommendations about that part. I mean, that is a plan recommendation. And the other part is, you know, the questioning of whether this portion of the roadway should still be a designated state highway. In the corridor plan, we said that that designation should be eliminated. And that was brought up in the stakeholders meeting, and in the stakeholders meeting, MassDOT dismissed it without a rationale. And I think a number of things have occurred over the years, over the recent history, as to a rationale as to why the Route 2A may not be the most appropriate, and might still be. I mean, part of it is still on the National Highway System plan. And it does provide access to the airport and the airbase. You know, it does have high volumes, and part of the question is, you know, what does that mean? So, but I think there needs to be some re-engagement in terms of the wisdom of keeping it a state highway. I mean, MassDOT has, you know, had some recent history where, you know, they've said, we'll reconstruct this roadway like Route 18, and then we'll turn over the maintenance to the local towns. And whether this is that type of road or not, I don't know, but we haven't had any engagement on it.
I think that's not a discussion for this
I think it is.
exercise that we're trying to do. I don't know. A sense of the meeting might say we need to get on with making those recommendations that we can recommend. We have a decent outline of those that, you know, that show where the agreement is and where it stands. We have to digest a little bit more, I think, what the park has just submitted this morning. I think a lot of what they're saying aligns with what the corridor management plan says, what Concord certainly has been thinking, Lexington, maybe even some things with Lincoln and Arlington come together better. So has everybody had a chance to really look at that and see how it reinforces what we're trying to do here?
Well, one example.
Well, what, Bob?
Oh, yeah, well, I did read the park's letter this morning, and so this is new information for us, the park's position on the crosswalks.
Right.
That was the main issue there. So we've got the park has stated its position, and I think they have a lot of clout in this process. Lincoln has a position on it. The Byway Committee, we are divided on it. And so I don't think we have. Pardon?
I think there's a majority opinion there now.
Majority, but we're not.
I know.
We don't have an agreement on it. Maybe we will once Lincoln has a chance to look at the park's letter. Maybe Lincoln's position changes. Right now, I'm getting pressure from Lincoln for maximum crosswalks. And so the Byway Committee is divided on the question of crosswalks. So I don't think we have a lot to add to the discussion.
I think we have a lot to add.
Well, we can add individually, we can act as a conduit for the individual opinions, but the opinions of the various elements or constituents of our group
So there's an objective way of looking at those intersections and crosswalks in a subjective way. So a subjective way is one thing, but you know, obviously, when I look at the Mill Street crossing, where MassDOT is forcing in 10.5 feet of pavement to say that for 30 feet, we want walkers to be walking on the pavement in that 10.5 feet, while 40-mile-an-hour motorists and cyclists are coming at them. To me, as a layperson, that seems unsafe. And I think one of the things that the park has said and that I feel very strongly about is that before we can recommend any crosswalks in Splitter Islands, is that there be a safety audit. And to say, for cyclists and pedestrians, will these particular crosswalks in Splitter Islands increase or decrease pedestrian and cyclist safety? And I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't know the answer. And I think that's one of the things the park is saying, and that's one of the things I'm saying, is that I don't have the expertise to know that on the 100% design plans, whether those particular intersections are going to increase or decrease pedestrian safety. I want a traffic engineer to evaluate that
Yeah.
for us.
When you're.
I will paraphrase what I thought the park letter said.
And
which
Ross
was-
wanted to make a quick comment.
No, it's okay. I was just
I'll
gonna
leave
say,
it on Ross.
Okay.
Please, Ross.
as a career traffic engineer, yes, it's making it safer for pedestrians. That's one of the reasons Mass DOT uses engineering and engineers. They have traffic engineers on staff. They use consultant engineers. What they're proposing does make it safer for pedestrians.
Can you explain that? Given
Well-
that they're now drawing pedestrians that don't go there now along the
Maybe-
roadway. for
Maybe
160.
pedestrians there, but if somebody's going to cross, it's not about how much you draw, really. I mean,
Really?
if there's somebody there once an hour versus twice an hour, does that really change anything about the plan? No, not really. But you're now using the Splitter Islands to slow cars. I disagree with labeling the Splitter Island area as a pedestrian refuge. We've gone through this. It's only 4 feet wide. There's no detectable panels in the middle. I never would have used refuge. But it is an area where if you're on one side and a car's going on the other, there is some sort of vertical device between you. And then you have the flashing, if you put the RFBs in, the flashing lights, now you have visibility to both sides of the road that somebody would be crossing. I hit the button on one side, the light on the other flashes.
On the
So
other
that
hand,
warns a driver. Now, again, the question was, do these things make it safer for a pedestrian? The answer is yes.
how about
So,
for bikes?
No, Richard said for pedestrians.
Yeah, I know. And I'm asking, what about bicycles who are at risk when a car tries to swerve around them and hits a 4 foot wide splitter or pedestrian aisle? There's no
Well,
place to go.
that's certainly a question, and that's why there are islands, there's signs in the island to warn you that there is an island. Again, I know everybody's going to disagree about what's appropriate and what's not and what you want. I know last time you pushed for flush islands. I have my own opinions on those, but the current design, as it's designed, as a traffic engineer, I'm offering you my professional opinion about whether it makes it safer. I think it does. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the 100% like appropriate situation, and I can understand everybody's differing opinions on it. But just to answer that question, it does make it safer.
I don't get it.
There's another safety issue that I just want to put out on the table, which is the Park Service and the folks who don't want to see crosswalks all over the byway have talked about the crosswalks not connecting to any park trails, any kind of improved pedestrian method of getting to the crosswalks. But that's totally within the control of the Park Service.
No,
And
it's not.
could easily be provided. So
No,
it
no,
just seems
Not
disingenuous.
easy. It's
Go
not.
ahead, Nancy. What?
I'm sorry. Just anybody who's ever worked for a federal agency knows extraordinary budgetary expenses are not easy to get, and it takes often years to get on a program to have projects funded. Take a look at the Sam Brooks house at the intersection of 2A and Lexington Road, and the paint and the clapboards are falling off of it, and that's been on the docket to be repaired for a long time. So it's not easy to fix those problems, and the park has flagged those. I think really the park's letter goes a long way toward hopefully getting endorsement of some of the preliminary recommendations we made, and they might, you know, you need 4 people on this committee, which is, you know, which is hard to do. And so I'm really struggling with where we go with this. And I know everybody's exhausted even thinking about it, let alone talking about it. So I
My
think,
view of what the park letter said, I only had the chance to read it quickly, but with respect to the intersections, my take was they're recognizing that this is a 2-phase project. Phase 1, as defined in these drawings, phase 2, and the details about pedestrian crossings, they're saying would be better dealt with in phase 2.
yeah, and I think it's more than the details. It's actually the location and if they're warranted and how to make them safe and respectful of the context within which they're located.
And I think for us on the work in this working group, but also, you know, knowing the sentiments of some others on the overall committee, I think we need to accept the fact that the state is looking at this as a 2-phase project and deal with that and try to influence it the best way we can, and not try to get everything done in this first round of resurfacing, because I just don't think it's very pragmatic.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
but Paul, the plans right now show crosswalks. The Park Service wants to do the crosswalks in phase 2, but the Mass Highway wants to do the crosswalks in their current plans.
The Park
So-
Service has,
But this is the whole point, Bob.
Yeah.
They've jumped out ahead of us and they've said, this is what we think, and it's on the record, it's official, not going away. The sooner we can get something written with the backing of the full committee into MassDOT's hands, and it's part of the record, and then the debate continues until you reach a resolution. But the longer we forestall getting an official position on the record, the less influence we're going to have.
I think.
I
it's-
agree, and I think part of the problem is that the committee has not asserted its obligations up to this point, and I think it's time that we do that. So I have created a document with what I think our recommendation should be. And at some point, if you want to hear it, I'll share it.
What does that mean? You've created a document, at some point you want to hear it, you'll share it. I mean,
I plan to tell you what I think the committee's recommendation should be.
and you got to do that, A,
Yeah.
B, C, D. That'd be
Yes.
good. Do it right now.
Oh,
Okay, Sarah had her hand up first.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah.
This is not pertinent to what you're discussing, but I keep asking this question and I've never gotten an answer. And that is, when will there be public hearings? When will MassDOT have any public hearings for stakeholders other than, I mean, they haven't even had public meetings. They've been coming to Battle Road Scenic Byway. But my experience in the past with MassDOT was that we had regular public hearings when we were working on Route 2. And I'm finding it really head scratching in terms of public process. And also, I would like to know where documents and minutes and comments and all MassDOT's work are available on one site. I want to be able to go to one website and access that stuff. So that, I think, needs to be the Battle Road Scenic Byway, but that means MassDOT has to provide you documents in a timely fashion. And MassDOT, when are you going to have public hearings? It's got to be before 100% design. I mean, it's irresponsible and unconscionable to have delayed this long.
I think the process the process flaws in this project are serious and deep, and it extends beyond the Scenic Byway
Yeah.
to historical commissions and federal, compliance with federal regulations in the National Historic Preservation Act and the National Environmental Policy Act. Just not been done.
Yeah.
So
I
we have a
don't wanna-
deeply flawed project in
I don't
terms
want
of
to.
process and design. And I just don't know where this group or the larger group, larger committee wants to go with it, because the committee has no clout right now, which is evident in the way the letter Clarissa wrote at the end of her tenure. That letter was not very satisfying in terms of responding to what the Scenic Byway folks wanted.
I was satisfied with that letter.
That came back. Have we just totally?
I'm not sure what letter you're referring to, the letter that you and Clarissa drafted?
No, Paul Stedman wrote back, and the letter was talking about a meeting, talking about the working group that all of the Battle Road Scenic Byway Committee seemed to support when Giles mentioned it. There is no working group other than the fact that the superintendent's letter did refer to a very technical transportation planner working group, but I don't think that's what was initially intended. But I think the byways concerns have not resulted in any real change or clarity.
To defend MassDOT, and Tim can do that also, but the reason for not having public hearings is that it is a simple resurfacing project. And whether or not crosswalks and these other things fit into that resurfacing, that's up for other folks to figure out. But the reason for no public hearings is that MassDOT has determined that it's simply a resurfacing project.
Which it's not.
That's correct. Well, that's what this project started out as. It's a resurfacing project. Since there's no, it's only minor addition of crosswalks. We're not widening that sort of stuff. So therefore it doesn't meet the criteria for needing a design public hearing, which would normally for a bigger project would be held at the 25% after 25% plans were prepared. That's why there hasn't been a design public hearing. I'm not sure what, we're trying, my being here and us having people, come in and respond to these things, and having stakeholder meetings is our effort at getting feedback from the public, basically from you people, to influence the design. But yeah, as far as the way our process works, there isn't a design public hearing needed for this project.
Nancy?
Who is first, Jane or Sarah? Jane? Go ahead.
Yeah, I sent Tim an email yesterday referencing a letter to Andrew Wilkins back in June, asking for just the surveyor's plan. I just want the basic plan. And it was based on information given to me by Connie Rafffield. And, I want to know, can you tell me how to get that plan without?
I saw your email. I haven't had a chance to look into it. Basically all that information, the surveyor's plan information is on.
I know, but you can't read it.
I know it is difficult to read.
There's a basic plan that they had to have that they wrote on top of it, drew on top of it. I just want the basic plan.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something we could figure out a way to get to you, but it's going to involve, one of the drafters creating a new.
Oh, come on.
Setup. Well, it's just altering the AutoCAD file and printing it such that all the proposed stuff is off of it. It
Would-
exists and it's not a huge deal to create it. It's just
Yeah,
not
don't
something
you
that
have
we
a-
have
okay.
sitting around.
Don't you have the survey as a separate document?
The
You-
right-of-way survey, the right-of-way survey.
Let me just ask Jane, do you have a hard copy of
Yes,
the
I have,
plans?
yes,
You
but that
do?
does, yeah, but that
Because
doesn't,
the-
it's so hard to read.
It's hard, but it's not impossible. It's
I
gray.
got
instead
new
of-
eyes and I use drops. I just want. the
Okay,
plain
okay.
one. Thank you. I'm sorry to
Okay,
get
I
I mean,
outside here.
I will
Thank-
get back to you
Thanks.
about that.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'm
you,
real
Sarah.
sorry here, but I've got a meeting that I have to get to. We're doing the tip and everything, and I'm supposed to be in on that. So
Tim,
anything real quick, please.
Tim, yes, I just want to remind you that we are not talking about a simple resurfacing project because of the context of that project. We
I
are
know.
talking about running a roadway through a national asset. And we are stewards of that national asset, and you are stewards of that national asset. That's my high horse. And, you know, I'm preaching, I know, to the choir, but please do not continue to hide behind the technical, this is only a resurfacing project. I think more of you than that. And my experience with District 4 was much better than that. So please, let's keep this in context. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I do have a couple of things before. Tim
I
leaves.
want to get a sense of the meeting first, please. This is us spinning our wheels and spinning our wheels. We're getting nowhere. I think everybody's patience is really short on this. If we can't agree, we
Well,
can't agree.
Well,
And
I would like to make. a
I'd like to
proposal,
hear
see
from
if there's
other-
something we agree.
can we just hear from Lincoln and Arlington about what,
Okay,
you know,
well-
where do you think we are and where do you think we should be going at this point? And should we
Okay,
clarify and move on?
on behalf of Lincoln, I would say that we have a good background compilation of information, and we have agreement on what we'd like to see on basically everything except the intersections. So I would say we go forward with all of our background and recommendations on everything but the intersections.
You're saying intersections, you mean crosswalks. I think.
Sorry, crosswalks. Right,
But we had conditions on the splitter islands and the crosswalks.
right. We have a disagreement on that we haven't really talked about. I tend to agree with whatever Mass Dot thinks is appropriate for the length of the splitters.
Well,
Um,
also,
You thought 46 feet was too long.
I
you didn't
just
say-
pointed out that originally they were about 10 feet long and they expanded quite a bit.
Well, what do you think the right number is?
I don't know. I want the least impacting balanced with effectiveness. There's one of, never mind, we're
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
getting-
well,
we're
it's
getting off
a
the
pretty
track.
minor thing. I would certainly defer to Mass Dot on what they think the appropriate length is. We can highlight that disagreement in our recommendations if you like. But I don't see where we're contributing anything by talking about crosswalks at this point because we're divided on it. I think we're divided. Lincoln may change its position once they read the Parks letter.
I think
But
we
as of
should,
right now, I'm being pressured by Lincoln to represent the town, and they have already stated they wanted crosswalks.
yeah, Paul. Oh, sorry, I thought you were done. Paul, what do you think? Where are we? What do you think? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, speaking for Arlington, I think the document that Bob prepared, the first draft was good. It summarized the concerns of many of the people in the working group. Your draft, Nancy, tightened it up, took out some of the background information. I think the background information is important. It should, wherever it goes, the committee should see it. So I speaking for Arlington, I think we should get a document together to bring it to the full committee and have the full committee decide how it gets transmitted to the state. And we should do that, by the next formal meeting, which is in about 2 weeks. I think the people of Arlington would defer certainly to the wishes of the town of Lincoln about the crosswalks, and get those dealt with as best we can in this phase one. My view is that the park has said it's too complicated to deal with in phase one. We'll deal with it in phase two. It's up to the people of Lincoln if they want to agree with the park on that or not. And I think Arlington would go along with the wishes of the people of Lincoln.
And Richard, were you going to say something?
Here's what I'm going to say. Number one is, Federal Highway is paying 80% of this. And, Federal Highway has designated this as the All-America Road. I talked with Ken Miller. Tim knows who Ken is. Ken Miller used to be at MassDOT in central planning, and he is now with Federal Highway, and he is the interface between Federal Highway and the Boston MPO. And I asked him what things were possible. One of the things I had sent you folks was something about advisory lanes as an alternative way of looking at the roadway. It meets all of the federal requirements to be classified that way, except the traffic volume is too high. The present traffic volume is too high to do that. But there are other alternatives in terms of, how do you equalize, our charge? How do you equalize the safety for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists? So he is going to try and figure out, what things are possible, regarding Federal Highway's interest in this project. So here's what I had suggested. So as the designated entity by the towns, am I sharing this? No,
Or what?
Let me share this document. So as a designated entity by the towns of Arlington, Lexington, Lincoln, and Concord in the Minuteman National Historical Park, and implicitly by MassDOT for implementing the Battle Road Scenic Byway Corridor Management Plan, MassDOT should consult with the committee immediately. They haven't consulted with us. They should do that. The following recommendations are only for that portion of the project that's designated as the All-America Road. So the portion from Lexington Road to Crosby Corner, I don't think we should have any recommendations for because it's not within our purview. So MassDOT had Tool Associates on to evaluate alternative roadway configurations, and they were partway through the process and were suddenly dismissed, and they never submitted a final report. So we don't know what the alternative configurations might be or how things might fit together.
I don't know, an August add date, and just we can move it around because we didn't lock it down.
Okay.
Sorry,
Until then.
Who was talking? Tim?
I don't know, that's so I think MassDOT should re-engage Truly Associates to look at the present roadway configurations that, follow what we have to figure out, follow context-sensitive guidelines to preserve intrinsic qualities of the byway, provide access to bicyclists, pedestrians, improve safety and mobility. So I'm saying until then, MassDOT should resurface the existing roadway. They should eliminate slip lanes because that is a specific condition in the management plan, and sign for 30 miles an hour, either with advisory signs or standard speed limits. Let MassDOT figure that part out. Crosswalks and Splitter Island should not be included in this resurfacing project unless a formal safety audit is conducted and they are proven to be safer for pedestrians and cyclists for not including them. So as Ross says, he believes that they will be proven to be safer in this particular context. So that accommodates everybody, I think. And so it says MassDOT must recognize the corridor management plan and the existence of historical and cultural qualities. They haven't done that yet. So the one consideration that we had to have in the plan is to undesignate Route 2A And if they choose not to, they should come up with a rationale. I think we can come up with a rationale as to why. We've asked to be a consulting party to the 106 process, and I'm not sure what formal feedback we've gotten on that part of it yet. And it appears that a lot of work still needs to occur before the plan can be finalized, and MassDOT should consider asking the MPO to move the project to the next fiscal year if it can't figure all of these things out. So that is what I believe the working group should recommend.
Well, what say you all?
What say I, Paul Fennelly?
All of you,
All of you.
all of you. You can go.
No,
I'm really looking for committee, you know, the working group, our little ad hoc working group guidance on this. I suppose we can take a vote on this and we could do majority. But go ahead, Paul, and we'll hear from everybody.
Well, I think I will stay with the draft that was prepared by Bob, and we'll get that edited as unanimously or as collaboratively as we can, and present that document to the full committee. I'm not in favor of having the full committee receive a recommendation from us that MassDOT should table this whole project to another fiscal year.
Not the whole project. Resurface. The slip lanes, I think, is something we didn't, and signage, the speed and the
I think when I say the whole project, we're fundamentally talking about the resurfacing project, which is defined as phase 1. That's what's before us. Phase 2 is something that's out in the future, still to be defined. So that's what I meant by the whole project. It's what's right in front of us now.
Yeah, I agree with Paul, not because he's agreeing with a document that I wrote, but just I'm just agreeing with what he said, which is to me, giving a punch list to the state about things they need to do before we're even going to have an opinion about things is just, to me, it just seems like a bureaucratic way of making sure nothing happens, or making sure that we have no voice in the outcome, because it's just this process. I know we haven't had full participation because we haven't had information in a timely fashion, but it seems to me we've got enough to state an opinion right now on the things we agree on, and we should just go forward with that. I mean, Massachusetts is just famous for taking 15 years to put in a traffic light somewhere, or, you know, doing anything. And it seems like the train is leaving the station and we need to weigh in on it. So.
Yeah. It's a little, well, Dick, we know, Richard, we know what you're thinking, but I am very reluctant to advance. I want to look very carefully again at what we all think we're recommending. I think we're recommending speed reduction, 10.5-foot lanes, and maybe speed, maybe the splitters and the pedestrian crossings might be safe, or might be better if they were at grade or whatever. But the Parks letter brings questions to the fore that I've been talking about for a long time, and other people have been raising for a long time. So I really need to look at the Parks letter. So I think we're nowhere.
No, I wouldn't say we're nowhere. Look at the Parks letter and then come back with any changes you want to suggest for the draft document we have.
Does anybody want to take a stab at that with Richard?
So I guess, so a question is Bob's recommendations going to include eliminating slip lanes?
Yeah, well, that was actually in the background that I had written for the first draft, that we liked the idea of eliminating slip lanes, but we didn't, it wasn't reduced to a formal recommendation, but I'd be happy to.
Well, it's a formal recommendation in the plan.
in the plan.
And the Carter
Like
management.
park management.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But it wasn't in
The
our,
park mentioned slip lanes too,
yeah,
right?
no, I'm happy to include that as part of our working group recommendation to the full committee. We didn't have enough of a discussion about it in our initial meeting, but I certainly am fine with that. So I think the central issue in front of us is, does the working group have a recommendation on crosswalks? And sounds like 3/5 of the working group, even though the Park Service is not here, but 3/5 of the working group does not want to see crosswalks in phase one, or certainly unless more information is provided.
No, in phase one.
Pardon?
In phase one.
Yes, yes, in phase
not-
one.
And not until we get more information.
Right, right. And so we have a divided working group, and given that we've got these.
What's the divide there, Bob? What's the 3 out of 5 that?
The 3 out of 5 do not want to see crosswalks right now.
But just so I understand, which of those, who are those 3?
Lexington,
Lexington.
Concord, and the National Park.
Okay.
And I mean, Lexington wrote a letter backing up Lincoln's position on crosswalks, or backing up in general Lincoln's position on the entire project back in June, I think it was.
When the configuration was very different than what it is now.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Lexington
in any event,
Historical Commission has it.
Yeah.
Has some
yeah,
different.
let's take it as a given that Richard and Nancy are representing their town's interests faithfully. So yeah, that's what the 3/5 are right now. I'm under acting under a position of the town of Lincoln that they want to see crosswalks. I've taken a little bit of heat that I did not take that position on Bedford Road, that I backed off on Bedford Road's intersection. And that was in the hopes of getting us all to an agreement, which didn't work out. So after I drafted the original letter a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, Lincoln and Concord said, no, that wasn't our position. We don't want to see crosswalks.
Say that again. You said Concord said what? About
that-
Bedford Road?
Well, no, not about Bedford Road, but in general, that you did not
Oh.
like the designs of the crosswalks.
Yeah, from the beginning.
Yeah,
First.
to be fair, I think you said that all along, but I didn't capture it in my initial
Oh,
document. Okay.
I got you.
Yeah. So that's where we are. We're divided on that. Do we add anything to the byway mission by stating a divided position on crosswalks? I don't think so. I mean, we've got powerful interests between the federal government and Mass Highway. Lincoln is in there, but I have to think that they don't have quite as much clout as the National Park and Mass Highway. And so to me, it doesn't advance the Byways Committee's mission to state that we have a divided position on this. I would just leave it out, provide the background that we've developed. We can give the different opinions of the different constituents of the Byway Committee, and just put it out there, and that's it, but not have it hold up the effort until we all agree on something, because I have a feeling that's maybe never going to happen.
So you're
So
saying,
I just want to make it clear that what I'm advocating is not Lexington's position. I'm advocating the Byway Committee's interests, which may or may not align with Lexington's interests.
Okay, that's a distinction that I also had to make when I said I'm okay with eliminating the Bedford Road crosswalk. So Yeah, I appreciate that, but it's hard. It's a tenuous position to be in, to have two different hats with two different recommendations.
And I know that's what the park's position is, that they're conflicted because, you know, they have a role as a park, and then they have a role as a member of this committee. And sometimes those things conflict. And from the committee's perspective, all that we have to go on is the corridor management plan and how to balance the perceived increase in safety and accessibility to pedestrians versus the cultural historical context, and how do you balance those competing interests?
And that's a
I'm doing
judgment
it based
call.
on- Yeah, it's a judgment call. I'm basing it based on how I read the corridor management plan. And you're doing the same from a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, just to take your side of the argument, I could make the argument that, or we could make the argument that all this stuff about pedestrian and bicycle accommodations, well, that's really for Lexington and Arlington. But then when you get to this section, which is an all-American road designation, Scenic Byway, yada, yada, that you got to tone down the pedestrian and bicycle accommodations and amp up the historical context. You know, these are judgment calls. I don't have an objective answer for sure. Yeah.
So who's going to do that? I don't feel like I'm probably the best person to do that.
I think Bob is.
Okay, let's clarify what that is. I'll be happy to write up a document, and if we can circulate it. We can't really have a public or a quorum dealing with a document, so I can be the focal point of anybody's comments, and I'll try and include them. But I'll prepare a document, send it out to everybody, and take your comments in. And rather than having you know, the open meeting law and all the restrictions on that, but I'll give it a shot. It'll certainly look more like what Nancy has just provided than what I started with a few weeks ago. Because I guess that will make Nancy feel better about it. So.
Well, I have deep fears about the future of the Byway Committee, actually, because I think.
Well, that's right.
We have not established any credibility with MassDOT. And I should tell you all that the Historical Commission in Concord is still not happy with the process that's been followed in terms of national laws, actually. So
Followed by MassDOT, is that what?
yeah.
Okay.
Historical commissions are supposed to be consulted from the beginning of a project, and before, I mean, that means a couple of years ago. And that's a 106 requirement for consultation. They're supposed to make certain findings under the National Environmental Policy Act and the National Historic Preservation Act that they're doing nothing wrong. And so they're going on, but those findings haven't been made. Is my understanding that those findings haven't been made. MassDOT as of January, or Mass Historical as of January 24th or something thereabouts, had nothing submitted to them by Mass Highway. So there's that process that's still going on right now. And, you know, I think the historical commissions, and although this is not, I'm not speaking for them yet, but I think the historical commission is going to align pretty closely with the parks letter.
I also think the town of Lincoln, I guess all of our towns need to see the letter that we just got this morning from the national park. Maybe that produces a change in some thinking
I was going to,
Lincoln.
I was going to send that report out to everybody on the committee, or do you think more broadly?
Yeah, more broadly.
Oh, yeah, well, it was sent to,
It is
to
public
all
information
the,
now.
it was
so-
sent to all the planners. I don't know where I saw that, but,
Well, yeah, it was sent to all the town planners.
yeah, to all the town planners, to Hanscom Air Force Base. I mean, but yeah, it's a public document, sure. Let's carpet bomb the world with it. Yeah.
Nancy, can I ask a question just on the 106 process and in terms of this committee? Because we had asked to be a participating party, or whatever the correct terminology is.
Consulting party.
Consulting party. Do you know what the status is, what we've received back from MassDOT about that?
I don't think we have received, I did not see the request going forward to be a consulting party, so I don't know where that went.
Yeah, because in one of our formal committee meetings, I had asked Clarissa
to do it.
whether she would do it on her own or whether we needed a committee vote to ask to be a.
And you
consulting
suggested also, you requested a letter and she said she would just call up the guys. Is that the same conversation?
Probably.
Yeah, so I don't know. I can ask.
So can
her.
you check to see what our
will-
status is?
I will ask her.
Because we obviously, as a committee, are going to have the same kind of a thing going forward, because as a committee, we will be asked to weigh in on the 106. And whether we have the same kind of conversation or not, I don't know, because I don't know
Probably we would.
what all the parameters are for the 106.
I'll ask. I will ask.
Thank you.
So that leaves it that Bob, is anybody gonna help Bob? Paul has some solid grounded ideas. So.
Can I get some of these documents? You know, you keep referring to Bob's report and the National Park letter, and like Sarah said, you know, I get everything in
Yeah.
bits and pieces.
This is one of the things that's a little puzzling about how the committee as a whole keeps its records. So where are the minutes stored? Every town does them separately, I think. And Concord doesn't have very many posted at all yet. And so one thing's to get that done. And then usually there are meeting documents that are put up before meetings, sometimes not far in advance, but sometimes better. So I don't know how exactly to do that. But I think that would be very useful. It would certainly get to your point. I don't think there's any reason why Bob couldn't share, or the Byway couldn't share that, his report with you. You guys think? What do you think?
Well,
think
we can certainly make sure Jane gets the documents. Making sure it's publicly available is a little trickier.
Yeah, I don't know exactly, like, I don't know how to do that.
Nancy
But
and
Heather
Bob,
might know.
oh no, I forgot my thought, forget it. Oh, Lincoln, when they made those decisions, they made them back when June, when that 2575 report came out. I was on the RTC, I went to the BPAC meetings, there was a couple other parties. Those decisions may not be the same 9 months later. So you can
Once
only
you see
say
the
so-
100%. Yeah, there was a
you can only
website.
say so much that's Lincoln's point of view. They might not be the same. And I will certainly speak up a lot louder on the RTC. I went with the flow a year ago. I'm not with that flow anymore.
Okay. So the other things you're talking about are the 100% drawings, probably.
Yeah,
Those are all
Lincoln,
just
I
public.
haven't heard that they made a decision on those, but they only did the 75. I gotta shut up, geez.
Well, that's interesting. I'll leave you and Bob to figure that out. But I think it's a bigger issue in terms of the transparency of the committee and how people know what we're doing and thinking and whether or not it matters at all. How do they get those documents? Mass Highway had a website for a while. And at least I was not able to, once I was asking for the survey for the right-of-way survey, I was no longer able to access that site. I think it was pulled down. That's too bad because that's where project information should be. So,
Didn't,
think the-
didn't
the
the
most
byway,
recent-
excuse me, didn't the byway committee have a website
We do.
a couple of years ago? I haven't looked at it in a long time,
documents aren't posted to it.
but they should be, right? We should have a way to do
We
that.
should be posting that stuff.
Yeah.
It's not worthless, but it doesn't help with what's going on right now. That's why it's somewhat irrelevant to the real world. But,
Yeah.
I keep hoping.
Well,
So-
yeah,
It's quite a challenge, and I think the Byway Committee needs to really think hard about whether or not, what is the basis for us to believe that there will be a different process? I mean, we're not making a difference now.
I think
because-
we're
Well,
making more of
the-
a difference than we did 6 months ago.
And the other thing is whether or not Federal Highway believes they have a role in this project.
Say that
which
one more-
they were not. Federal Highway, whether they believe they have a role in this
Oh.
project. They were unaware of the project.
Well, they're the person
difficult.
who's responsible for dealing with these kind of things when they're not the primary. They defer a lot to Mass Highway for many projects. And that's what they've done in this case. But
Which is why they're
I think-
reviewing it,
what?
which is
what-
why they are looking at it themselves.
Yeah, and Casey Campetti is the person I was talking to, and that's her job. And I think I owe her another call, just so she's not totally unaware of what's going on. Okay, but she was copied, I believe she was copied on the Parks letter, I believe.
Do we have a byway committee meeting, a full committee meeting scheduled 2 weeks from today?
I think it's the 24th if we do the fourth
Okay.
Thursday of every month.
So I would like to put together this document in the next day or two, over the weekend, certainly, get it out to everybody. And I'm wondering if we should just have another, hopefully very short meeting next week, just to converge on the final document to transmit it to the full committee.
I guess I'm hanging in there for that. I would urge people to really, really, really look carefully at the Parks letter because it is incredibly well grounded. And they've had the benefit of transportation planners that every day sit with landscape architects at some place in Virginia and figure out how to make the fit between safety, access, and preservation.
Yeah, I had a chance to read it. It's a very strong letter, and I'm all for making it part of what we're going to submit to the whole committee, and get it all on the docket with MassDOT sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I think I'm guessing that I believe the Historical Commission in Concord will certainly align with that, and maybe others. I don't know. Even the Lincoln Historical Commission letter paid a lot of, gave a lot of respect to the preservation access or aspect of the project. So, okay, Bob, do we want to try to meet on the 17th for a very brief time?
I think that's a good aspiration,
Okay,
particularly on the brief part.
okay.
Just,
Heather?
I'm out on the 17th. So if someone else's town can set up the Zoom and someone else can start it, because I will not be in the office on the 17th.
Well, would Nancy be able to do what she did before for me?
I
Okay.
don't know. And I mean, I took over last time so that Nancy didn't have to sit through a long meeting. I will not be available to
Yeah.
take over. So
But
it would
it's
be
not-
more helpful if another town could set it up.
Oh, Bob, can you do that?
Yeah, Paula, our planner, is out until next Wednesday, but I think her assistant can do it, Jennifer. Yeah, it's just a question of posting the agenda with a Zoom link, correct?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Heather, thank you. Everybody, thank you.
All right, I move that we adjourn.
I was just gonna ask for a vote.
Second,
Okay.
second.
Lincoln, aye.
Aye.
Lexington, aye. Arlington,
Yes.
aye.
I-
Concord, aye. And many thanks again, Heather.